Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why even with the best treatments, chronic pain can still be so tough to manage? This new study dives into that very question and how we might be able to make things better. So chronic pain, right? It is a huge deal for so many people affecting their lives in every way. We know that talking therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT are a big part of the recommended treatments. And CBT can be really helpful, but the honest truth is that for many people, the improvements are only moderate. Why is that? Well, a big part of it is that everyone's pain is different, and what works for one person might not work for another. It is like a one-size-fits-all approach, just doesn't cut it when it comes to something as complex as chronic pain. That is where personalization comes in. The idea is to tailor the treatment to the individual, focusing on the specific psychological processes that are making their pain worse. But how do we actually do that if we just rely on a therapist's gut feeling? It can be a bit hit or miss because even experienced therapists can have their biases. And right now, we don't have enough data to build perfect computer programs that tell us exactly what to do for every single person. So what do you do when you need structured guidance but don't have all the data yet? You bring in the experts. This study decided to do just that. They wanted to create a tool called a matching matrix that links specific parts of CBT, called modules, to the psychological processes that need targeting in chronic pain. Think of it like creating a guide that helps match the right therapy tool to the right problem for each person. To build this matrix, they used a clever mix of methods. They started with what is called a Delphi technique, which is basically a fancy way of getting expert agreement through several rounds of surveys and discussions. But they didn't just send out a questionnaire. They began with focus groups. Imagine a group of about 22 experienced clinicians. People who work with chronic pain patients every day. They got together in 5 separate focus groups. In these focus groups, they presented the clinicians with a list of 23 different psychological processes that are common in chronic pain, like catastrophizing, which is when you imagine the worst-case scenario about your pain, or avoidance behavior, when you stop doing things because you are afraid of triggering your pain. For each of these pain processes, the clinicians were asked to pick their first and second favorite CBT module that they thought would help. What is really interesting is that they first rated this anonymously, and then they discussed their choices as a group. After the discussion, they rated them again. This initial round was all about getting their initial recommendations and understanding which CBT modules might be best for each pain process. Now, what they found in this first round was pretty eye-opening. When they tallied up all the choices, there was a clear trend. The clinicians tended to pick what they called third-wave CBT modules much more often than the older classical CBT modules. Modules like self-compassion, acceptance, and values. Based action were big favorites. These are the approaches that focus more on accepting difficult thoughts and feelings, and living a meaningful life, even with pain. They noted that some clinicians mentioned they might choose these third-wave modules more in this study context than they typically do in their daily practice, where older CBT techniques like attentional control or relaxation might be more common. This hints at a potential shift in how clinicians are thinking about treating chronic pain. After that first round, they took the results and refined them. 15 of those original clinicians participated in a second round, this time through an online survey. They were presented with the initial matching matrix developed from the focus groups and asked to rate how much they agreed with each match on a scale. This was to see if their initial recommendations held up after some reflection. The good news is that for the first choice modules, meaning the top pick for each pain process, the clinicians showed really strong agreement. Most of these first choice matches met their criteria for agreement. But they didn't stop there. To further validate these findings and bridge the gap between practice and research, they brought in 4 renowned chronic pain researchers. These researchers were also presented with the clinicians' recommendations. They discussed the proposed matches, considered potential downsides or alternative scenarios, and gave their own input. This step was crucial for cross-validating the data and ensuring the matrix was both clinically relevant and scientifically sound. So, after all these rounds of expert input, they came up with their final matching matrix. This matrix lists 23 different chronic pain processes and suggests 2 CBT modules for each, a first choice and a second choice. For example, if the process is "I thought," it will never get better. The first choice module is the cognitive module, and the second choice is activating resources. Or for "I stopped activities because of my pain." The first choice is exposure in vivo, and the second choice is activity and rest. What is really striking is how consistently the clinicians and researchers agreed on the first choice for most of these processes. The study team mentioned that all the first choice module selections met the predefined criteria and didn't need further debate. This suggests that even though individual experiences of chronic pain vary, there is a shared understanding among experts about which core therapeutic approaches are best suited for common pain, related psychological processes. However, there were some areas where the second choice modules, the alternatives, required more discussion. This makes sense, as there can often be multiple good ways to tackle a specific process. And acknowledging that flexibility is important, the researchers see this matching matrix as a really important first step. They're essentially taking the implicit knowledge that clinicians have and formalizing it. It is a way to provide structured guidance when we don't have a complete evidence base for super-personalized algorithms yet. They also observed that the preference for third wave CBT modules like acceptance and self-compassion was quite strong among the experts. They suggest this might be because these approaches are particularly well suited for chronic pain, where acceptance and living a valued life are key. Now, every study has its strengths and limitations, and this one is no different. A major strength is that they brought together both practicing clinicians and researchers. This collaboration is vital for bridging the gap between what happens in the clinic and what the science tells us. They followed best practices for conducting these kinds of expert surveys, ensuring that the process was structured and transparent. They also made sure to get input from a range of clinicians, reflecting the diverse reality of chronic pain treatment. However, it is important to acknowledge what the study didn't do. Importantly, patients themselves weren't directly involved in creating this matrix. The researchers point out that in clinical practice, shared decision making with the patient is the gold standard. So, while this matrix is a great tool for clinicians, it should be used in conjunction with understanding the patient's preferences and individual needs. They also noted that the way the items were presented without specific patient stories might have led some clinicians to rely on their general experience rather than a specific case. And this is something for future research to explore. Also, they didn't transcribe all the conversations from the focus groups, which might have provided even deeper insights into why certain choices were made. Ultimately, this research gives us a valuable tool. The matching matrix is a formalized guide based on expert knowledge. It is not meant to replace scientific evidence or clinical judgment, but rather to support it, especially when the evidence is still developing. It's a step toward making CBT for chronic pain more personalized and potentially more effective by ensuring we're using the right tools for the right problems. What does this mean for you? Well, if you are dealing with chronic pain, this is the kind of thinking that can lead to more tailored and effective treatments. It means that experts are actively working on ways to move beyond general advice and get to the specific needs of individuals. For clinicians, this matrix could be a helpful guide when planning treatment. It encourages a focus on the underlying psychological processes, aiming to address the root causes of pain-related disability. Future research will likely build on this by further testing these matches, seeing how they work in real-world treatment settings, and of course, incorporating patient perspectives even more deeply. They also raise a really interesting point about whether specific interventions only affect one target process. It is possible that our understanding of how different CBT modules work needs to become more nuanced, looking at patterns of effects across multiple processes. So, to wrap up, this study is a great example of how we can use expert knowledge to build a foundation for more personalized care, especially when that perfect data-driven algorithm isn't quite here yet. It highlights the importance of acknowledging the individual nature of chronic pain and moving towards treatments that are as unique as the people experiencing them. What are your thoughts on this approach to personalizing pain treatment? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this breakdown helpful, give this video a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more deep dives into the fascinating world of psychology and science. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.